Today we talk about Moses Upchurch, a great-great-grandson of Michael Upchurch, who came from England to America in 1638. Being a member of the fifth generation of the family, Moses was a head of a clan, one of 22 clans we identify in the family. He was born at least as early as 1753 in Brunswick County, Virginia, possibly as early as 1750. He was moved as an infant with his father to North Carolina, where he grew up in southern Franklin County as to be an adult and to go off to the Revolutionary War, and then to return and marry and have a family there. When his family was about grown, he moved them all, lock, stock, and barrel, to the Chatham-Wake border, about 20 or 30 miles west of the Franklin County Upchurch enclave. There he died at about age 100. Now, we'll have to call this part one because there's so much known about Moses that we'll have to have more parts to tell about all of his activities. Let's move to some of the visuals. I'd like to show you the location in Brunswick County, Virginia, where he was born. It's in the vicinity of Fitzhugh, just east of the town of Brunswick. And we've talked about other Upchurches who lived in this Upchurch enclave at that particular place. Now let's take a look at the colonial American chart so we can be for sure where he fits into the family. Here you see the green arrow, which shows Moses Upchurch being one of 11 children of Richard Upchurch II, who headed the Moccasin Creek branch of the family. He being then a son of James Upchurch I and a son of Richard I, and eventually a descendant from Michael Upchurch I. Now, we take a look at the place we call the High Ground Triangle in southern Franklin County, North Carolina. And here you see this little spot that we've described previously, particularly when we talked about Moses' father, Richard Upchurch II, and how he ended up raising his family in this particular part of Franklin County. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the fact that Moses Upchurch was such a solid citizen. And since he spent most of his adult life in Franklin County, I'll mention a couple of things there. Now, we have so many examples of Moses Upchurch that I can only cite a very few. There were 124 entries in his biofile system. And in there I find quite a few number of examples of him being selected to perform civic duties in Franklin County, North Carolina, in the period, say, from 1780 to 1800. For example, he was selected to be a juror. Then there were other cases where he was selected to perform in a more local responsibility. For example, to lay out a road or to maintain a road. And I'd like to tell you just a little bit about these two particular kinds of citations and what they mean for us. If a person is selected a juror, it's quite likely that the fellow jurors were drawn from throughout the county. So if you see a list of these jurors, one of whom is Moses Upchurch, you can presume that they were at least members of that county, but maybe not close neighbors. However, if you see him as being selected to lay out a road or to maintain a road, and there are 8 other individuals who are also identified to work on this project with him, you can be sure that they're fairly close neighbors. My point is that by looking at the records, you can soon tease out who lived close to whom and what kind of associations they had. This is very important to us in trying to give the full story about anyone like Moses Upchurch from the colonial era. Now, a special feature of this particular individual is that he and his brother, Nathan Upchurch, who happened to be my ancestor, as two brothers, both elected to move their families from Franklin County, North Carolina to the Wake-Chatham border. and we call the area they moved to the Brothers Enclave. And I'd like to show you a few little sketches of what that part of the world looked like. And here I have to show you a particular little chart which was based on earlier work that was done on Moses' brother Nathan. And here you see laid out in green, near the Wake Chatham border, the land that was owned by Nathan Upchurch and his family at about the time Nathan died in 1835. And then just nearby you see a yellow area, which is another large block of land, several hundred acres, owned by the Mills family. Now it so happened that one of Nathan's sons married into the Mills family, so these are all very closely related. And then just across the county line you see the word Moses Upchurch. Now we'll have to talk a little bit more about exactly where Moses' land was. In talking about this particular area, this Brothers Enclave there on the Wake Chatham border, I'd like to digress just a moment to mention to you a technique which you can use in learning more about your family if they happen to have lived in a given area for quite some time. I show you here, for example, the Goodwin family book of Central North Carolina by Jerry Goodwin. And in this particular book, there's a great deal of information about the particular area in which Moses and Nathan lived on the Wake Chatham border. And in this book, there are, for example, 112 Upchurch individuals cited. Now, this is just one book. I could put my hands on 5 or 6 more books of different families that recorded how their family grew up and married and intermarried and lived and how they made their livings in this particular area. So by looking at book after book, we begin to knit together how the families existed in this particular area and time. Now, when you think about trying to place Moses, you bear in mind that with Nathan, we knew pretty well where his land was because cousin John Lee Upchurch Jr. took it upon himself some 20 years ago to map out all of the pieces of property that Nathan owned, and he and his children and so on. Something on the order of 1,000 acres, large block of land. Now with regard to Moses, we've never had anyone to do that. What we do know is a brief citation, which I'll read from Belle West's book on the Upchurch family about Moses, who was her ancestor. And she writes about Moses in one particular instance, this circumstance. Moses was apparently making plans to move further south to what appeared to be better tobacco lands, evidenced by the fact that on 25 July 1803, while still living in Franklin County, he had bought 555 acres of land for 400 pounds from Joel Cook in Chatham County, North Carolina. This tract was described thus: beginning in Joseph Taylor's line, then to a stake along a line that has been partly run between John Pitts and Joseph Pitts, to a white oak on the west side of Pitts Creek, to a pine on the west side of the road to Fayetteville, to the university, supposed to be another dividing line run by Joseph Pitts, to a stake on Pearson's Corner, to the county line. This deed was proven in February court 1805 by Nathan Upchurch, who of course was the brother of Moses. Now, here's the situation. Taking what Belle West said and talking to other people and reading things over the years, starting in the mid-1970s, I could not quite figure out where Moses' land was. It was said to be on Pitts Creek. Well, I never could find a map with Pitts Creek on it, but what I did find was a map with Kitts Creek. Now, Kitts Creek is pretty far up the Chatham County, Wake County line, about 4 or 5 miles north of where Nathan lived. And I thought, well, they've made a mistake. Pitts Creek and Kitts Creek are the same thing. Then, not so long ago, let me look at the record here to see exactly what it was. I happened to be on a field trip, and exactly it was on the 6th of June in 2010 in North Carolina. And I made detailed notes on that field trip and put them in my files, not realizing what they really meant until I started to prepare for this talk. Now, that field trip was made with a cousin, Billy, who is now retired and lives in the community. He was raised in that community. He has his ancestors that go way back in that community. And as we drove around, he told me various features about the community. And when I look back at my notes from June of 2010, what I find is these notes I portrayed before you now, which I've enhanced by adding a green line which shows the county line, the division between Wake and Chatham counties. And then just to the left of that I show a blue line. Now I see here on my notes that I recorded that was Pitts Creek. Well, if you look on today's map, you don't find it called Pitts Creek, it's called Rocky Creek Branch. So for the first time I'm now recognizing the name Pitts Creek quite close to the Chatham-Wake line. So looking at this, I said, my goodness, why didn't I recognize this all along? So I called cousin Billy and I said, tell me why you told me that was Pitts Creek. And he said, because my folks always told me that's what it was. So you see, friends, here's a case where things are not written so plainly in the history books or in the records, but by teasing out information from people whose memory goes back and who has memory of what's been handed down to them in the family, you pick up something that's quite vital. Now, we'll have more to say about exactly where this tells us that Moses' land was. The point is, we know now it's not on Pitts Creek far to the north, 5 miles. It's right here, just across the line in Chatham County, not too far west of where Nathan's property was. Well, you can see I was very excited about learning that, and I'm excited about portraying this information to you. I turn now to what I have created as of what I think is an elaborate map of what I call the Brothers Enclave on the Wake in Chatham County, established by Moses and Nathan Upchurch in about 1803. And let me place a green border around the area that I think was actually more or less the area that I would call the Brothers Enclave, with Nathan being to the east and Moses being to the west. Let me describe a little bit more about this map, which I hope we will look at time and time again as we return over and over again to Nathan Upchurch and to Moses Upchurch. Just to the left of this map, just off the map, is a New Hope Creek, which a few decades ago was dammed and is now called Lake Jordan. And the Upchurches from this area of Moses and Nathan eventually did spill over in that direction and even across the creek and on to Pittsburgh, which is the county seat of Chatham County. You'll notice this map has Cary off to the right in the upper right-hand corner, and in fact Cary spills around to the east, and to the south we would have Apex, and to the northwest we would have Chapel Hill, which was formed in 1791, and we often hear of there being a coach that went from Raleigh to Chapel Hill in the 1790s and early 1800s, going through the Upchurch Brothers Enclave. Now, just to the north of this area, you'll see Mount Pisgah Church. It was formed about 1814, and we know that the ladies in the family, that is the wives of Nathan and Moses and their daughters, were very active in the formation of that church, which would have been formed then just a few years after Nathan and Moses moved to the area. So Nathan and Moses lived about 2 miles apart from east to west, and both of them lived about 2 miles or 3 miles south of Mount Pisgah Church, which undoubtedly would have been a focal point in the social aspects of the community. Now, I'd like to address with you in more detail where the land of Moses might have been. So what I've done is now treated this special map, the Brothers Enclave, in a little different way, and I have placed on it a square here which is about the size of 555 acres. And now that's not the exact shape of the land. We're still trying to find out what the deed would call for in shape, but that's about the size it would be. And you can see it occupies a sizable portion of the land that lies below Luda Shop Road and north of Green Level Road West. And it touches upon what you see there as the Rocky Ford Creek, also earlier known as Pitts Creek. Now you'll recall from the deed, it says that this touches the county line. So somehow when we figure out the dimensions, we'll have to bring it up in part to the county line. But you notice that it also said it touches the main road from the University to Fayetteville. That would be the north-south road. And that is represented on this map more or less by present-day Highway 751. Now, in Moses' day, that road might have been slightly different, because undoubtedly, when they modernized 751, they straightened it and probably moved it a mile or so one way or the other. But this gives us a reference point, taking Moses' land from touching the county line over west to what might have been an earlier version of 751. So we have here then an elegant map to take us into the future that we can return to over and over again. Now, to close out this little session on Moses Upchurch, I'd like to return and recap his journey. And I show you here a more or less modern highway map, which starts in Virginia at the yellow highlighted place called Brunswick. And you'll recall the little town of Fitzhugh is just east of there, which is where undoubtedly Moses was born. The green line then takes you south to the little town of Pierces, which is in the middle of the high ground triangle in southern Franklin County being outlined in orange here. And then the 1803 move, the green line takes Moses and Nathan from Pierces or the high ground triangle west to a highlighted area going past Raleigh on to the Wake-Chatham line. And you can see there on this map the Highway 731 we have previously referenced, and just to the left of that the blue colored Lake Jordan, and the yellow highlight is the general area in which the Upchurch Brothers Enclave existed. So here we have a wonderful portrayal of how Moses was born in Virginia, lived a good part of his life in southern Franklin County, and lived out his last days of 50 years in Chatham County. It is said in family lore that he died when he fell off of a horse crossing a creek and drowned. I do not believe that, because I've looked at those creeks and there's no way a person could drown in one of those creeks unless someone held his head underwater. With that, I'll leave you with the story of Moses Upchurch.